This is Radio New Zealand International's review of Pacific current affairs in Dateline Pacific. I'm Don Wiseman. Today, Jakarta says security forces are not entirely to blame for the Papuan violence. Doubts over politicians' desire for political reform in Vanuatu. You hear about the effects of a severe shortage of doctors at Solomon Islands National Hospital. There are claims that a United States bill will have a devastating impact on the indigenous people of the CNMI. Japan has turned down a Marshall Islands request to fix a gymnasium that's been damaged by termites. And in sport, organisers say the Pacific mini-games are on track. Indonesia's government says ongoing violence in the Papuan region, known internationally as West Papua, cannot be solely pinned on the country's security forces. The UN Human Rights Committee recently highlighted the violence there, deplored the excessive use of force by security forces, with signs of discontent with Indonesian rule among indigenous people. Referring to a high number of extrajudicial killings in the past 2 years, the committee says violations are likely to continue with no effective mechanism available to hold the military accountable. Johnny Blake reports.
Indonesian officials deny recent reports from Papua province that about 40 West Papuans were executed by the military in Puncak Jaya region. Rights groups and journalists find it difficult to access this remote region, which is controlled by the military, in order to verify the reports. But the Deputy for Political Affairs to Indonesia's Vice President Dewi Fortuna Anwar says there are many different perpetrators of violence in Papua.
A lot of the victims are in fact not the result of state oppression against Papua. A lot of the conflicts have in the past years have taken place due to local conflicts related to local elections, for example.
However, the head of the Papua Peace Network, Niels Tobias, says West Papuans live in a persistent climate of fear because of the heavy military presence.
The presence of Indonesian troops indicates that the Papua conflict remains unsettled one. So, therefore, as long as political conflict of Papua is not resolved yet, the military has justification to assign more troops in West Papua.
Niels Tobias says civil society groups throughout Indonesia recognise that militarisation is not a solution to the Papua conflict and that dialogue is needed between Jakarta and the West Papuans.
In order to jointly identify problems and root cause of the problems, but also to discuss together solutions to their problems.
However, the nature of the conflict is such that dialogue has itself become a victim. Responding to the UN Committee's concern over the lack of freedom of expression in Papua, Jakarta has insisted that freedom is not absolute. This is reflected in its new law on mass organisations, imposing firm limitations on freedom of expression and association and broad prohibitions on NGO activities. Human Rights Watch's Phil Robertson fears the law will expose civil society to even more problems in West Papua.
The Indonesian government has gotten credit where credit was perhaps not due, as being such a broad reformist government. It still contains very conservative army, civil servant groups, and also, of course, corrupt, self-interested politicians. And these groups don't like having NGOs snooping around. They don't like having them going in and working with villagers or other persons who are being displaced from land or having their rights violated.
Dewi Fortuna Anwar says the government is concerned about undemocratic behaviour by the military, but she admits Indonesia is still developing its democratic institutions and mechanisms, such as those which could hold the military to account in Papua. This is Johnny Blake.
Measures to increase political stability in Vanuatu, such as clamping down on party hopping, have been outlined in a paper that will be debated by parties later this month. One MP who's been calling for change is confident an agreement will be reached to finally put an end to countless motions of no confidence and uncertainty. The electoral group says it remains to be seen whether politicians want to change a system that they've abused over many years. Bridget Hunnicutt reports.
The MP Ralph Reagan-Vanu says the Prime Minister Moana Pakis's Kawasil
will be calling for all presidents of political parties to discuss proposals to reform the political system during the next parliamentary session. The Minister of Land says a paper outlining a number of options, which includes requiring political parties to register in accordance to specific criteria, has been prepared. He says another option is to give the party who wins the greatest number of seats a mandate to choose a Prime Minister, while cutting down on party hopping is also a high priority.
If an MP wants to step from a party, they'll actually have to go back to by-election because they'll elect on a party ticket and have to give the voters the opportunity to decide whether they wish to elect on a different party ticket.
Ralph Reagan-Vanu says changes would need the agreement of all parties, and ones that require altering the Constitution would have to go to referendum. But some believe a complete overhaul of the electoral system is what's needed. Transparency International Vanuatu has completed a report on last year's election, which found major fraud took place. The chairperson, Marie Noel Patterson, says the main issues were discrepancies in voter registration and a lack of transparency in the second count of the votes.
We found that from the poll that there was 192,000 registered voters, when in fact, compared to the population that is more than 18 years old, we should have only 120,000 people.
Vanuatu's first president, Ati George Sokomanu, says the country should have an upper house where the chiefs could sit. Mr. Sokomanu, who is also advocating for a presidential system, says the Great Council of Chiefs has no power and has to defer to the legislature.
I think the only thing now is to slot them in and have a lower house and an upper house in Parliament and let the chiefs play their part in the development of Vanuatu.
Marie Noel Patterson would like to see Vanuatu adopt a two-round runoff voting system, which she believes will stop the election of candidates who are only supported by a minority of the electorate. She says politicians right across the spectrum have been complicit in allowing an electoral system which can be misused.
They're all absolutely responsible for what is happening. Democracy doesn't apply in Vanuatu, and especially when you look at the MPs representing 5% of the population in some places, it's almost a joke of democracy.
However, Mr. Reagan-Vanu believes the first step is fixing the current system and thinks the move to electronic voting, which the principal electoral officer has already started to investigate, will solve a lot of problems. He believes there is a genuine commitment among political parties for reform. This is Bridget Tunnicliffe.
The manager of the emergency department at Solomon Islands Main Hospital says a severe shortage of doctors is stopping the unit from properly functioning. Dr. Kenton Sare says there should be 9 doctors rostered on for each shift. This department has to make do with only 2. He says at a conservative estimate, the emergency department treats more than 150 patients every day. Other parts of the National Referral Hospital in the capital, Honiara, are also under extreme pressure.
Elsewhere, if you go, you will have the luxury of having more than one hospital within the area. So people can actually have a lot more choice to go or to go to specific area in the woman's place. Other places don't have that. Everyone comes here.
And with you saying that this hospital was built by the British originally, what was its capacity originally?
Not sure.
I guess it's not equipped to deal with the population.
No, I think as you rightly mentioned, figures have shown that we probably have one of the highest birth rates in the world. It has dropped a bit, but it's still quite high. This also means that I think our figures from our labor ward, the number of beds that we have only in National Referral Hospital can fit one school in a month.
Cater for those women giving birth here when you've got to deal with the ill people as well.
I think if you take the opportunity to go and see the labor ward, they have about 1 to 3 bathing suits. At the moment, they have closed down 1 bathing suit to try and keep mothers who have given birth while waiting to go to the postnatal ward. So that's the kind of load that they are carrying. And you have mothers giving birth on the first stage room. You have mothers giving birth on the corridor. At times it does happen like that. So this labor ward, I risk that needs some attention, maybe a bigger space, but that's something that we have to work on. We wrote at least 2 doctors here at any one shift, or just the morning shift. At night shift, we have two doctors, which one usually sits here and one basically looks on the other side.
So the four of you cover those two shifts that you described earlier?
Yes.
Gosh, and so what if one of you is sick?
Well, that means the other three have to carry the load for the four.
Right, and what was it like during the recent dengue outbreak? It's been really difficult.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why it has gone back to the team that's looked after the outbreak, and it has come through the ministry, and we have a bit of help from the OSMA team. I think there's a New Zealand team as well that came in during the outbreak. A little bit that they kind of this actually give us a bit of a backup.
Yes, but I mean, just week to week. Normally, without the dengue, would you not be fairly exhausted?
I can smile, I can laugh, but the exhaustion is there.
That's Dr. Kenton Sare, the manager of the emergency service at Solomon Islands Main Hospital, speaking to Amel Husband. You're listening to Radio New Zealand International's Dateline Pacific. The Northern Marianas Descent Corporation says the recently passed U.S. Senate immigration reform bill threatens to disrupt social, political and economic aspirations of the indigenous people of the CNMI. Parts of the legislation grant improved status for some 11 million undocumented alien workers in America. The corporation says its CNMI-specific provision paves the way to citizenship to long-term legal foreign workers. A member of the group, Felicidad Ogomoro, who's also a representative in the CNMI legislature, told Bridget Tunnicliffe that the vision of the indigenous people will never be realised if the section is signed into law.
The members of the corporation maintain that Section 2109 of the Senate Bill 744 seeks a pathway to citizenship to more than 13,000 foreign workers, and we're talking of foreign workers, we are not even mentioning about their dependents in the CNMI. What this would do is that it would change and disrupt the social, political, and economic livelihood and aspirations of the indigenous Chamorros and Carolinians who are of Northern Marianas descent, who have always wanted to maintain their autonomy and be self-governing. And this self-government is a right that is guaranteed and protected under the covenant the people of the CNMI entered into with the United States in 1976. This section takes away the rights, our rights to local self-government, as has been agreed upon and guaranteed under our covenant.
Who makes up a large majority of those alien workers? Where are they from?
Based on the statistics, on the figures that we are getting, the biggest number came from the Philippines.
And so has this been happening sort of slowly over the past 10, 20, 30 years, that these alien worker numbers have been slowly increasing over time?
Right now, because of that mandate that says that we are going to control that number, and by 2014, December 2014, the number would phase out. No alien workers should be here by that time. So we want to make sure that that mandate is kept.
What will happen to the economy, though, if you lose 23,000 people?
That is what the local people and the United States have to work with. We need to work with the United States government to make sure that our economy still survives. Also, being very mindful that whatever that decision is, that it would not be to the disadvantage of the indigenous people.
That mandate to phase out the alien workers by the end of next year, are you concerned that there's going to be a backtrack on that from us?
I would not say that they would backtrack, but I think right now we have to be serious about fulfilling that mandate, but do take into consideration our continuing need for non-resident workers. I do not want to see a slacking off. Now, if there is any need, let's talk about it. But we have to really show that there is a real effort in reducing the number of alien workers here in the CNMI. Jobs must be available for the indigenous people, the U.S. citizens that are here.
Felicidad Ogomoro of the Northern Marianas Descent Corporation says the bill is now before the House for consideration. The Japanese